Before we begin, there is one quote says, "Music is a language that doesn't speak in particular words. It speaks in emotions, and if it's in the bones, it's in the bones." This quote, popularly attributed to Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, sums up what human experience has been telling us for centuries and what science is now getting better at explaining. Music is happiness, and it transcends cultures, space, and time. Music is universally understood. Researchers have revealed strong links between music and happiness, suggesting that music not only makes you emotive but also correlates positively with overall health, emotional well-being, and productivity. Music releases a chemical in the brain that has a key role in setting good moods, a study has suggested. The study, reported in Nature Neuroscience, found that the chemical was released at moments of peak enjoyment. Researchers from McGill University in Montreal said it was the first time that the chemical, called dopamine, had been tested in response to music. Dopamine increases in response to other stimuli such as food and money. It is known to produce a feel-good state in response to certain tangible stimulants, from eating sweets to taking cocaine. Dopamine is also associated with less tangible stimuli, such as being in love. In this study, levels of dopamine were found to be up to 9% higher when volunteers were listening to music they enjoyed. The report authors say it's significant in proving that humans obtain pleasure from music, an abstract reward, that is comparable with the pleasure obtained from more basic biological stimuli. Music psychologist, Dr. Vicky Williamson from Goldsmiths College, University of London welcomed the paper. She said the research didn't answer why music was so important to humans, but proved that it was. This paper shows that music is inextricably linked with our deepest reward systems. Musical free zone. The study involved scanning the brains of 8 volunteers over 3 sessions, using 2 different types of scan. The relatively small sample had been narrowed down from an initial group of 217 people. This was because the participants had to experience chills consistently, to the same piece of music, without diminishing on multiple listening or in different environments. A type of nuclear medicine imaging called a PET scan was used for 2 sessions. For one session, volunteers listened to music that they highly enjoyed, and during the other, they listened to music that they were neutral about. In the third session, the music alternated between enjoyed and neutral, while a functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI scan was made. Data gathered from the 2 different types of scans was then analyzed, and researchers were able to estimate dopamine release. Dopamine transmission was higher when the participants were listening to music they enjoyed. Can music really affect your well-being, learning, cognitive function, quality of life, and even happiness? A recent survey on music and brain health conducted by AARP revealed some interesting findings about the impact of music on cognitive and emotional well-being. Music listeners had higher scores for mental well-being and slightly reduced levels of anxiety and depression compared to people overall. Of survey respondents who currently go to musical performances, 69% rated their brain health as excellent or very good, compared to 58% for those who went in the past and 52% for those who never attended. Of those who reported often being exposed to music as a child, 68% rated their ability to learn new things as excellent or very good, compared to 50% of those who were not exposed to music. Active musical engagement, including those over age 50, was associated with higher rates of happiness and good cognitive function. Adults with no early music exposure but who currently engage in some music appreciation show above average mental well-being scores. Let's take a closer look at this study. Those are pretty impressive results, to be sure. However, this 20-minute online survey has some limitations. For one, it included 3,185 U.S. adults ages 18 and older. That is a small number if you are extrapolating to 328 million people across the country. For another, it is really a survey of people's opinions. For example, although people might report their brain health as excellent, there was no objective measure of brain health such as an MRI scan, or even a test to measure their cognition. Lastly, even if the ratings were true, the findings are only correlations. They do not prove that, for example, it was the exposure to music as a child that led to one's improved ability to learn new things. It may be equally likely that those children brought up in more affluent households were both more likely to be exposed to music and to be given a good education that led to their being able to easily learn new things later in life. But let's assume that the results of the AARP survey are indeed true. How can music have such impressive brain effects? Although we don't know the answers for sure, developments in cognitive neuroscience over the last few years have allowed us to speculate on some possible mechanisms. Music has been shown to activate some of the broadest and most diverse networks of the brain. Of course, music activates the auditory cortex and the temporal lobes close to your ears, but that's just the beginning. The parts of the brain involved in emotion are not only activated during emotional music, they are also synchronized. Music also activates a variety of memory regions. And, interestingly, music activates the motor system. In fact, it has been theorized that it is the activation of the brain's motor system that allows us to pick out the beat of the music even before we start tapping our foot to it. Use it or lose it. Okay, so music activates just about all of the brain. Why is that so important? Well, have you ever heard the expression, if you don't use it, you'll lose it? It turns out this is actually true in the brain. Brain pathways, and even whole networks, are strengthened when they are used and are weakened when they are not used. The reason is that the brain is efficient. It isn't going to bother keeping a brain pathway strong when it hasn't been used in many years. The brain will use the neurons in that pathway for something else. These types of changes should be intuitively obvious to you. That's why it is harder to speak that foreign language if you haven't used it in 20 years. Many of the old pathways have degraded and the neurons are being used for other purposes. Music keeps your brain networks strong. So just how does music promote well-being, enhance learning, stimulate cognitive function, improve quality of life, and even induce happiness? The answer is, because music can activate almost all brain regions and networks, it can help to keep a myriad of brain pathways and networks strong, including those networks that are involved in well-being, learning, cognitive function, quality of life, and happiness. In fact, there is only one other situation in which you can activate so many brain networks all at once, and that is when you participate in social activities. Dance the night away. How do you incorporate music into your life? It's easy to do. Although the AARP survey found that those who actively listened to music showed the strongest brain benefits, even those who primarily listened to background music showed benefits, so you can turn the music on right now. Music can lift your mood, so put on a happy tune if you are feeling blue. Up-tempo music can give you energy. And if you combine music with an aerobic and social activity, you can receive the maximum health benefit from it. Participate in a Zumba class. Do jazz aerobics. Jump to the rhythms of rock and roll. Or, better yet, go dancing. And yes, in a pandemic, you can still benefit by doing these activities virtually. You may have heard that music can help you focus, increase your test scores, or improve your memory. Pretty remarkable, really. Music affects us in incredible ways. There's no shortage of music in the world, especially given the myriad cultures, genres, and the vast number of websites and apps available. Music is now more accessible than ever before. Music can affect your mood. The easiest way to understand why music has such a powerful effect on the mind is to monitor brain activity while someone is listening to music. Columbia University developed a machine that effectively does just that. The results show different parts of the brain that are activated when a song is playing. Music may be the secret to improving test scores, staying focused, and improving your mood.